Good afternoon and welcome to CFA UK's Wednesday webinar at 1. Today's webinar was organized by the Careers Committee. Seth Wainwright, founder and director of Wainwright Scott, will cover how successful people utilize the power of presence to come across effectively. Seth will explain how we can build presence and, most importantly, how to become our own presence coaches. Seth started his career as soft skills learning specialist in the telecoms industry before moving into the banking sector. He founded Wainwright Scott in 2011. He has worked with a broad range of financial sector firms across 5 continents, delivering a variety of solutions around topics of impact, leadership, and client skills. Seth has created and delivered learning programs for Bank of America Merrill Lynch, Nomura, Credit Suisse, BlackRock, JP Morgan, Morgan Stanley, and Barclays, as well as non-financial organizations as diverse as Burberry, Jaguar Land Rover, and Everton Football Club. Before we begin, the presentation will take roughly 30 minutes, after which we open to Q&A through the appropriate box on your screens. Seth, over to you.
Thank you very much, Gerhard. Good afternoon, everybody. It's a real pleasure to get to spend half an hour with you this afternoon talking about executive presence. I should say that I am suffering a little bit from a cold, and I'm averaging a coughing fit about once every 45, 50 minutes. So I'm hoping it's not going to happen during this webinar, but if I go very quiet for a few seconds, I've not left you, chances are I am on mute having a bit of a coughing fit. So I'm going to apologize in advance for that. Let's hope it doesn't happen. It's because it is a real pleasure to be here with you. Executive presence is a topic that we at Wainwright Scott Limited are very passionate about, and one way or another we coach around it and we train around it with a whole range of audiences, from graduate and intern programs right up to director level. And it's always a topic, a subject, a title, I think, that promises a lot. Build your executive presence. And I'm sure it's promising a lot today, 30 minutes, and I will help you understand how you can build your own executive presence. The one thing that I think I should say at the start is that although as a concept, executive presence is something that we would all be happy to have more of. So if, for example, someone came up to us and said, hey, I've got a pill here. If you take this pill, you will develop 40% more executive presence, and there are no side effects. Most of us, assuming we trusted that, I guess if it was someone just randomly coming up to you on a street and offering you a pill, maybe you wouldn't take it. But hypothetically speaking, if we knew that this pill would give us more executive presence, then we would take it. We would happily have that. We'd have more executive presence. But we would do that, perhaps, without really defining what the phrase means. What does executive presence actually mean? And of course, that's something we have to have a look at today. It's where we start, if you like. What is executive presence? That's the first question. And the second question is, why should we care about it? Why is it important? At the moment, I can see we have 69, 70 people now joining us, and you will all do different things at different levels for different reasons. Is executive presence something you should all be interested in developing in yourselves? Well, yes, I think that it is. But again, it comes back to your definition of what that phrase means to you, what you understand by it. And we will also cover such things, because we have to talk about executive presence, things such as impact, behavior. I'm going to take you through a series of what I call presence builders at the end of this webinar as well, something I call the 4 C's of building presence. And regardless of your definition of what executive presence means or what you do, these presence builders tend to be areas that, if you do develop yourselves in them, if you do focus on these areas, promote how you use these ideas, these strategies in your job, chances are a fairly large proportion of people will see and hear you behaving and say, you know, this is someone I feel does have real presence. So that's where we're going to finish today. And then, as Gerhard said, some Q&A at the end, which I'm really interested in getting from you. So look forward to hearing your questions there. So what is executive presence? Or what is it to you? Because it means different things to different people. Somebody that one person thinks has presence, someone else may think, well, actually, I'm not sure for me that they do, or I wouldn't describe them like that. And for that reason, I always say it's very much in the eye of the beholder whether someone has executive presence. It's not something we can ever say that we have. I mean, if anyone was to say, I have executive presence, I would argue, well, if you've got to say it, chances are perhaps you don't really have it or do it. It's not something we can put on our CV or on our LinkedIn summary to say, hi, you know, I'm Bob, I'm 31, I have executive presence. Doesn't work like that. It's very much in the eye of the beholder. It is a term that people have come to use to describe a behavior, a consistent style, a consistent way of behaving that to them makes them feel like this person has presence. So what we need to do is to think about, how should we behave? How do we behave? How should we behave? How should we think so that we behave a certain way, so that others perhaps start to define us in these terms, rather than walking up to someone and saying, hi, I'm Seth, I've got executive presence. We can't do it like that. So what is it to you? This is something that it's worth thinking about. I would ask you to think about that. You know, you've come on this webinar, it's a topic you're interested in, but how would you define executive presence? The second question on our agenda is, why is it important? Why should you care about this? Well, perhaps to help answer that question, I can share with you a little bit of research by a gentleman called Harvey Coleman. And he's a name that you can Google to find out a little bit more about the research behind this particular model, which is known as the career pie. And the reason it's called the career pie is because it touches on 3 areas that Coleman says everyone needs to focus on, to manage, to develop in order to have real long-term career success. So the career success that you will go on to have, and I'm sure you will go on to have much career success, but how far you go, that is going to be down to 3 areas, the 3 slices of this pie, the P, the I, and the E. And that stands for performance, image, and exposure. The 3 areas you need to be focusing on and managing and developing proactively and consciously in order to really unlock your career potential. But as you can see from the pie chart, the influence that these 3 slices have individually over career success, quite different, quite disproportionate. And that's why this is an interesting little bit of research, I think. What Coleman says is that fundamentally your performance in doing a job, what you do, how successfully you do it in terms of meeting targets, doing what you're paid to do, in terms of influence over long-term career success, that equates to only 10%. Whereas your image, what others think of you, that's 30%. So what we take from this model is that your image, what others think of you, you can call that your brand if you like, or your impact, but fundamentally, this is how you behave. Your image is the sum total of how you behave. That has 3 times more influence over long-term career success than performance. Which is not to say performance isn't important, of course it is. But performance alone, capability alone, is not enough to have long-term success. And as I'm sure you can see now, the third, even bigger slice of this pie is exposure, which has 6 times more influence over your long-term career success than your performance. And exposure is your visibility. It's how many people, how many influential individuals are aware of what you do, and more importantly, how you do it. There is no point in being fantastic at doing a job if nobody knows that, because opportunities will not become available to you. You will be passed over purely because people are ignorant of the fact that you are fantastic. You are the best, perhaps, at doing certain things a certain way. And yet, it's very easy for us to go through our careers and think that if we focus on performance, we will be recognized for career success. And perhaps even to think that regardless of how we do something, it's really results that count, most importantly. And these days, as I'm sure you know, in the current climate, particularly in financial services, that's very, very much not the case. Take performance and image together, those two slices of the pie, you could call that your reputation, and will always be so. Your reputation to others is about 1/4 how you perform to 3/4 how you consistently behave. And again, let's not lose sight of that. We are human beings. This is how we work. This is how we build relationships. This is where our opinions of others, the extent to which we want to work with them, connect with them, buy things from them, whatever it might be, that's where this comes from. Fundamentally, the quality of the person, how they behave, how we judge that. So perhaps you can see now how a concept such as executive presence starts to have real meaning, real relevance to our career success in terms of us being successful. And it's for our organization's benefit as well that we think about how we have this presence to instill a certain confidence, a certain way of others judging and perceiving us so that we can be successful and our organizations can be successful too. We talked a little bit about it. Again, your definition of executive presence perhaps is the most important one. It's going to be perhaps different to the next person. I have heard many wonderful definitions of executive presence. Often they're quite oxymoronical in that it may be something like a quiet power, which is a bit of an oxymoron, or a calm assertiveness. Again, that's a bit of an oxymoron. Another one that I really like is a confident interest in others. That's a great definition. Think about someone that you know of, or perhaps you have worked with, who you think has real executive presence. Great. Now, more importantly, think about how they behave. Fundamentally, they are behaving a certain way consistently that is making you think that. You can do that. You can behave that way and still be you. It's not about pretending to be somebody else. It's about you being yourself at your best every day with certain skills, accentuating certain behavior. There you go. That was my first coughing fit. If you would like to volunteer people who you think have executive presence, please just write them in the Q&A section so that we can all have a look. It would be great to hear who you think actually has executive presence. When I ask in classes who people think, come up with an example of someone that has presence, particularly executive presence, this is the number one choice of all time, Barack Obama. Executive presence. He seems to typify it, be a role model for it, for a lot of people. Not for everyone, but for a lot of people. And again, he doesn't behave in any way that should be impossible for us. He has nothing in his toolkit as he communicates and influences and does his job, or did his job, that we cannot do ourselves. All we need to do is understand what that behavior is that is really resonating with us and then do it more ourselves. Got some examples we can see here already coming up, some great ones. Angela Merkel, Aung San Suu Kyi, Steve Jobs, got a photo of him in a minute. Here's another president. Now, I'm not going to get political about this. Does he have executive presence? Again, being very careful not to cross that line into politics. But what I would say is think about some of those definitions that I've heard before. a calm power, a confident interest in others. When we talk about the Obamas, a lot of people talk about, I'm getting some comments here. Those were rhetorical questions, but I'm getting some comments anyway about Donald Trump, and I'm going to steer clear for all of them. When we talk about the Obamas, often people talk about Michelle Obama as well. Again, similar ways of behaving, perhaps very specific individuals. These are some of the people that, and one person that very much doesn't, get given as examples on courses and workshops that we do. Very different, very unique personalities doing different things, but fundamentally this comes down to how we behave. And particularly, I have to say, excuse me, how we behave under pressure. Because that's usually, the real sense of that person. It is how they behave when they're under pressure. When someone behaves when everything is fantastic, that's a much easier thing to manage than, okay, well, the proverbial has hit the fan, and yet this person still behaves the same way. And these individuals here have incredibly pressurized jobs, and when that pressure gets applied, they crack. Do they behave differently? Some great names there as well. Rex Tillerson, Alec Baldwin. I wonder if this is Alec Baldwin when he's playing Donald Trump on Saturday Night Live, which I think he does very well. But again, let's move on from him. Here's another ex-president, Bill Clinton. Again, very easy to be presidential, to have that presence when you've got a flag behind you and you've got the stars and stripes behind you and you've got an expensive suit, nice cufflinks, great presidential wave there. This is a photograph that you would get hold of pretty easily if you Googled Bill Clinton. This is one you wouldn't get hold of pretty easily. This is why it's not a very good quality photo. It's quite grainy because I had to meet certain individuals in certain car parks at night wearing a long Macintosh coat and a hat pulled down and exchange some envelopes just to get hold of this photo. Now, this could be any time in Bill Clinton's career. Have a look at the body language of Bill here. He's under some pressure. I'll give you that. I'll let you know that we're sort of talking about a moment of truth, certainly for Bill Clinton. But again, look at the body language. Feet together, hands together between the knees, covering the groin area in a kind of praying motif, and it's sort of got that praying hand gesture going on there, but also pointing down a little bit, face neutral, shoulders low, not sitting back too much in the chair, not sitting forward too much in the chair, very neutral suit, neutral facial expressions. I don't know for a fact, but I would say very much planned. That this is, it's not an accident that Bill is sitting like this. He is taking control of his behavior to have a certain impact, to have a certain presence. If, again, I was to ask you at what moment of Bill's career, Mr. Clinton's career, are we looking at here? What would you think? What would you say? Feel free to drop me a note. Yeah, there we go. Bang. Lyndon's got it. I mean, he's just sitting on a chair. And we know that he's famous for certain things, but this is actually the reason the quality is so bad. This is actually a lighting shot. This is a lighting test. It's checking that the lighting is okay for an interview, which is about to commence, a televised interview that is about to commence, where Bill Clinton, for the first time, says, yes, actually, that he did have relations with Monica Lewinsky. And he is just about to do that. And this photograph is literally somebody checking that the lighting is okay for the cameras. So he didn't know he was being photographed. What he knew was that he was about to have that conversation and the tapes were about to roll. And that's the thing about presence. When we talk about presence, when we talk about image, we are talking about behavior. That is what we are talking about. How we behave, what others see and hear. That is how they will decide whether or not they think that you have presence. And you may have seen this before, but just as a quick reminder, your impact, your image, your behavior, it comes down to three things. It's the words you use, verbal behavior, It's the way you use those words, vocal behavior, so tone of voice, and it's visual behavior, fundamentally how you look, facial expressions, how you dress, how you move, eye contact, those kind of things. And what we saw with Bill Clinton just a moment ago was all visual behavior, but how much information did we get? So in terms of overall impact on others, what others think about us, how they would define us, the extent to which they are connecting, feel connected to us, want to connect with us, want to spend time with us. Well, according to psychologists, what that comes down to is not very much the words, quite a lot in terms of tone of voice, and a hell of a lot in terms of how we look. Impact on others is said to be 55% visual behavior, 38% vocal behavior, 7% verbal behavior. So very specifically, the key thing here is the impact that you have on others, whether or not they believe you have executive presence. That is 93% non-verbal information. The question is, how aware are you, particularly under pressure, of how you behave in a non-verbal way? We tend to listen to the words we use, not always. Sometimes I can talk and I stop listening to myself. But on the whole, we tend to listen to the words that we use. But how well do we know how we sound, what our tone of voice is like, what our body language is like, what our gestures are like when we're in those situations? How well do we know that? How well do you know that? If you get feedback from others and you're happy to get that feedback, you will probably know. And if you don't, you may not. But I'll tell you one thing, there aren't many individuals that I work with, particularly at a senior level, that I believe who have real high levels of executive presence. There's not one of them there who does not make it a weekly thing to get feedback on how he or she behaves, so that they can take control and make necessary adjustments. And they've also gone through this process of really just tuning in to their own behavior, not just the words, but really learning to become more self-aware about how they sound and how they look as well, which of course is something that anyone can do. It's something that anyone should do, has to do as a first step to really developing their presence. Because that's what it's about. It's about understanding, how do I need to behave consistently in front of others so that they believe I have presence, which helps me be successful? And how am I currently behaving now? And how close are those two places? How I need to behave, how I'm currently behaving. How can I close that gap? That's how you build your presence. There's something that's known as the 7 observables. So when people are reading your behavior, and that's how they're getting a sense of you, these are the sort of things that they're picking up on. Some of these more obvious and common sense than others: dress and grooming. Words and language, again, only one of those. Posture, movement, gestures, facial expressions, eye contact, whether we smile or not. These things will become a massive part of who you are to someone else. And that will be your reputation to that person. It's the story of you that other people tell. That is your image. That is your reputation. Tone of voice. We forget how powerful it is. I mean, look at this sentence here. I never said I kissed your wife. I appreciate kind of a random statement, a slightly odd statement for a webinar like this, but please stay with me. I'm going somewhere with this. I never said I kissed your wife. I could email that to someone. Let me be very clear here. I have never had reason or cause to email this particular sentence to anyone, but I could if I had to. And the meaning seems clear, but is it? Because I can accentuate, I can emphasize with my voice, with my tone of voice, different words and entirely change the meaning. I never said I kissed your wife. 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 Okay, you get the idea here. It's easy to forget that when you write an email, which of course we all do, and it's very difficult to have a lot of executive presence within an email. When you write an email, you put the emphasis in As you read it out aloud in your head, as you're writing it, as you write the email, you say it out loud in your head and you add emphasis. Does this emphasis magically go through the wires and the cables of your computer and your telephone system and get beamed to the other side of the world? No, it's completely left to the random nature of how someone reads an email and adds the emphasis themselves as they read it and can completely change the meaning. So that's why behavior is so powerful and why you need to tune into your behavior. But also, very simply, sometimes you need to think about how you are communicating with others in order to have presence. You will have more presence simply by picking up the phone or speaking to someone face to face than writing the most beautifully articulated email. And how you see yourself, it's what we call self-image, very different to what others see and hear. We tend to judge ourselves more on what we're trying to do and our beliefs and our values. That's the sense of self that we have. That's where self-image comes from. But no one else is going with that. They're only going with observable behavior and how they read it. Which is why in every large group of friends, often there's that one individual that, although they seem to be very comfortable with themselves, everyone else actually, quite honestly, thinks they're a bit of a twit, but they don't realize it because image and self-image are different things. And if you don't have someone in your large group of friends who is like that, then just be very careful because it could be you. It might not be, but it could be, so just be careful. Mindset drives behavior, drives performance. So again, another area of executive presence is how we think. It's not just a case of behaving a certain way, particularly under pressure. It's how we think. It's our mindset. It's our belief system. We have to take control of how we think. We very specifically have to take control of how we respond to others, particularly in pressure, because as I said earlier, that is a real sign of who we truly are. It's the real us that tends to come out in behavior under pressure. And you can't control events. You can't control outcomes. But the one thing we can always control is our response to events. Any event, regardless of the pressure we are under, how much pressure that event puts on us, we control our behavior. We control our response. Therefore, we influence, we may not control, but we influence every outcome. And that's something that we can all learn to do. A little bit of emotional intelligence. Breathe, think, respond. Don't just react, being driven by our emotions. Can't control the behavior of other people. Can't control the events, can't control the behavior of other people. And a lot of our frustration comes from trying to control uncontrollable things like other people and events. But you do control your behavior. If you want to, you can always control that response. It's what people, senior people with executive presence, do, which almost makes me want to go back to those photos of people that I showed you earlier. So, which one of those are best at controlling their response to things that they don't like? But I sense I'm getting political again, as is Philip, I notice here on the Q&A. I'm running out of time, so let me get to my presence builders. So these are things that I would suggest that you can all focus on to build your presence. And again, it's semantics at the end of the day. Is it building presence? Is it building a reputation? Is it building your brand? Is it building your profile? Is it building your impact on others? I don't know. Fundamentally, I can't tell you exactly what you are building. What I can say is these are the things that successful people tend to do, and they get described in very positive terms. And one of those terms is executive presence. And this is from 15 years or so of me doing the job. These would be the things that I would recommend. What I call the 4 C's. 4 C's of building your presence. Control, connectivity, curiosity, and confidence. Taking control of your emotions, of your reactions, of yourself, fundamentally of your behavior. Now, a great way to do that is just learn to slow down. Particularly under pressure, learn to slow down. Nothing is that urgent unless the building is on fire. Nothing is that urgent that you can't consciously take control of yourself and slow down. And I mean everything. How you speak, how you breathe, how you type, how you think. Just go slower, particularly under pressure. And to others, that will encapsulate a sense of presence, a grace under pressure. Even if you are the proverbial swan, graceful on the surface, legs flapping 10 to the dozen underneath the water, to others, the observable behavior is of someone who has that presence. And more importantly, perhaps, you are taking your time. So your chances are what you do say and your responses and your behavior more logical, less emotional, more appropriate, gets a better level of performance. Connectivity, a confident focus in others. When you meet someone, when you're with anyone, you can focus the conversation and your time on one of two people, yourself or them. Make it them. And when senior people do that, particularly with more junior people, focus the conversation and the time on the junior person rather than turning the spotlight back on themselves in that confident, warm, genuinely interested, curious way. They come off brilliantly. They have presence, a real sense of presence. So here are some things that you can do, little things there as well, making eye contact, smiling, listening, really listening, not just waiting to talk, but really listening. But fundamentally, it's the mindset, the focus on the other person. So there we go. That's the third C. I've already talked about that. Curiosity, be inquisitive for longer, ask questions, ask more open questions, use more questions, and check your understanding, check your assumptions, and spend a bit more time going a little bit deeper with people to really understand them. Knowledge is power after all. At least the intelligent application of knowledge is very powerful in business. But also, more than that, it is what connects best with other people, that you are interested in them, rather than just wanting a platform to talk about you or sell you. It's a win-win, it really is. And, the fourth C, that's just about stepping up and doing it. Confidence. Stepping out of your comfort zone. That's where the great experiences are. That's where the learning is, outside of your comfort zone. So do it. Challenge your self-talk if you don't think it's helping you. Watch out for those beliefs that hold you back. But fundamentally, be prepared and make it part of your own development to step outside of your comfort zone so you can learn things and do things and experience things. And, all I can say about that is I'm sure, in fact, I'm 100% confident that nothing extraordinary that you ever do in your careers will come from within your comfort zone. So that's where I think you need to be. That's kind of that's a 33-minute, slightly running over there, run through. And apologies, I've not got through to all of your comments here. I'm going to have a look through them in a second because I can't multitask. I can't read and talk. I'm just a man after all, but I will have a look through them. And I think I can go over to Gerhard now and we can hopefully get some Q&A. Is that right?
That's right, Seth. Thank you very much. Great presentation. I'll go over the comments. From Natalia, she asked if you can go back to 2 slides before. I'm not sure exactly where that is. If Natalia could post the slide she wants to see.
Yeah, if you can.
Meanwhile, I'll go on to Philip, mentioning George Bush during 9/11. I guess that's regarding presence. And from Andrew Lato, he's asking if performance drives image and presence. Surely in jobs where performance can be measured, such as investing, it is performance that is most important.
Great question. Performance, of course, is important. If we look, that pie model, if you don't focus on the performance, if you just focused on image and exposure, you'd spend your life going around trying to ensure that as many people as possible know how awful you are at your job. And you may tell them about how awful you are in your job in a really impactful, warm, charismatic way with real presence. So, of course, you've got to perform. But it's the fact that that alone these days is not enough. Being good at your job is not enough. Everybody is good at their job. If they weren't good at their job, they would not have that job these days. Someone else would get that job, or the job itself would just be taken away. So it's more about the fact that performing really well almost creates a level playing field. Hopefully, you won't get fired, you won't be made redundant. But as smaller numbers progress every year in business, get promoted, get recognized, there has to be a difference. It has to be performance plus. And it's not just performance, it is who you are as a person. Because progression also is about the fact that new opportunities will open up to you. You will get new things to do, new tasks, new jobs, new relationships. If you're working at a senior level, you may be unproven around those things at the moment. So we don't know from your performance how you're going to perform doing other things. But what we get a sense of is who you are as a person, what your attitude is, what your mindset is, what your levels of energy and positivity are, how you behave, your track record with people, your track record under pressure, your track record in dealing with problems and failure. That kind of performance really is about how you have thought and how you have behaved in those situations. Often performance is behavior. So absolutely, I take the point that you have got to perform. Don't stop performing, but also be aware that it's not the differentiator that it used to be. And if you want a long-term success, if you want opportunities to open up for you, you've got to nail that performance, but also start thinking about what is the story that I want people to tell of me? If I was to meet you and I went up to one of your colleagues and said, "Hey, I've not met Philip yet. I've not met Andrew yet. I've not met Kiara yet. Tell me a little bit about them. Tell me a little bit about them. I've not met Lyndon yet. Tell me a little bit about him." What would you want them to say? I hear a lot of people described in these terms when I do my job. Well, yeah, he's good at his job, but yeah, she's very knowledgeable. She's very good at what she does, but she can be difficult. And that's all I would say. This is all food for thought, and I wouldn't ask for anyone to believe everything I say, but sort of think about it and what you can take from it for your own world and for your own jobs.
Thank you. Just got an update from Natalia. I think she's looking for the slide on posture, movement, gesture, facial expression.
Ah, yes, the slide that I went through when I realized that I didn't have as much time as I thought I did. That makes sense. But perhaps I think I went through that one a little bit too quickly. These are known as the 7 observables. Now, I'll be honest with you, off the top of my head, I can't remember who first came up with these. They're out there in the public domain. Something to Google. The 7 observables. So these are what psychologists say are the things that we tend to pick up most quickly or most readily, things that we tune into when we connect with people for the first time and start analyzing to fundamentally judge who we think that person is. Psychologists call it thin slicing, which is a lovely term. We take the thinnest slice of information or behavior about someone, and whatever we have, however little that amount is of information about that person, we will still judge the person on that information because that's what we do as human animals. We want to define people and who they are to us. It's a safety mechanism, more than anything, to make sure we are safe. You sit on a train late at night opposite someone and you look to read that behavior to get a sense of, well, am I safe with this individual? And sometimes we get it right, sometimes we get it wrong. We may read things into little micro behaviors and dress and eye contact and how clean somebody is, whatever might make us feel slightly unsafe on a train. But psychologists say that even even if the only bit of information you have got about someone is their name, the most arbitrarily assigned piece of information, isn't it? I mean, it's not really doesn't really have any connection to who that person truly is. It's just a moniker they've been given. But someone give someone the name of someone and say you're going to meet this person later. And not with every name, but with certain names, we'll start judging the person. If it sounds slightly regal or if it's double barreled, oh, they're obviously going to be posh. Or apparently the female name that has the worst immediate impact is Chardonnay. I read in a bit of research recently.
Thank you, sir.
Very unfair that,
Uh,
but that tends to be the way that we work. Sorry, I was having another coughing fit. I'll have another coughing fit while you get another question, Gerhard, if that's all right.
okay. A very interesting question from Din Quan. He asks if you have any tips for young people who are relatively junior in the organization and how to have presence without being seen as arrogant.
Great question. It's a question I get asked a lot. The thing I'd say is this about that. The fear of coming across as arrogant will often stop people from projecting confident, capable behavior because they're worried it's going to come off as arrogant. It doesn't. And the danger is because you're so scared of coming across as arrogant, then you do nothing that others perceive as confident or credible, and you disappear. You are paid to step up. You are paid to speak up. You are paid to have an opinion. You are paid to challenge what somebody is saying if you honestly believe that perhaps there is something not quite right or could be better in what they're saying. That is often the job. But the fear that this is someone who doesn't know their place and it's going to reflect badly on you can stop a lot of junior people from doing that. And I do grad programs. I work with banks, and a lot of the time, my organization, we speak to some of the MDs on teams, say in private banks or investment banks, and if there's been, a placement there, and they've had an intern with them for 2 or 3 or 4 weeks sometimes. Often we speak to the MD and say, look, we're trying to get a little bit of feedback so we can feed this back to the individual. And you've had, Kelly on your team now for 4 weeks, and we'd love to get a little bit of feedback on Kelly. And you'd be amazed how many times that MD turns around and says, who? You have? Had an intern, have we? Kelly? I honestly don't know who you're talking about. And they can't even remember who that person is. That's the danger. That is the danger. If you think you are a good person, if you think you have integrity, if you think that you have potential, if you think you have common sense, and you feel something needs to be said, or something isn't right, or you have a question, then ask it, say it, and have confidence that even if people don't agree with you, they will respect you for speaking up. And it is the number one concern that I have from my clients when I work on grad programs is how quiet and invisible junior people are. And I think it's down to that very belief that has just been mentioned there. Was it by Kiara, did you say? And what it is a self-limiting belief. It is not a truth. It is not a fact. It is just something that you believe, a feeling of certainty that it is very reasonable to have, but there isn't truth in it. And it is a great example of how you have to challenge certain beliefs because they will hold you back.
Thank you. Question from Sangita. Where do internal politics lie within the pie?
Internal politics. Where does internal politics lie within the pie? Well, that's a very interesting question. I could take it off into many areas. I think the thing that I'm thinking immediately on hearing that question makes me think that when we look at, let me go back to that slide. When we look at the pie, apologies, I have to do a little bit of rewinding. There we go. Image is 30%. will be 30% of your career success. Image is about behavior, but it's also about behavior that not necessarily that we've even seen ourselves, but perhaps behavior that we have heard about. So internal politics is a lot of, so and so has said this and so is saying that, and you've got to be careful about so and so because you don't know the thing about them is these are their real motives and their real intentions. Just be careful. But really, the person's only saying that because they have their own intentions. That's all internal politics. But again, it's the nature of beliefs that it doesn't take a lot for us to hear something about someone and who they are as a person. And even though it's literally just words coming out of someone's mouth, we go, well, that sounds reasonable. You're saying that Bob tends to have a fiery temper, so be careful about getting him to work on my project. Well, I have no reason to not believe you. Therefore, I believe you. So I think that's where internal politics plays a part for me. You do have to be careful that sadly it's human nature that it's not just observable behavior that becomes part of your reputation. It's hearsay and what other people say about you. And hopefully we will challenge that a little bit. And hopefully we say, well, you know what? I have to take people as I find them. But if 3 people have said Bob's got a temper, I'm going to believe Bob's got a temper. And that might just be all internal politics. But if you're a good person, and you have integrity and you do the right thing, you will minimize the effect that internal politics has on you because people will want to work with you, connect with you, and be with you. And that should minimize how much internal politics affects you. Certainly, I wouldn't let it keep you up at night unless you really have questionable motives and methods in the workplace. And I'm sure no one here does.
Thank you. The last question from Kiara. How do you change others' perception if there's noise regarding your past behavior?
Ooh.
That is, micromanaging, reduce calmness under pressure.
Wow, that's an interesting question. So the question was, let me make sure I got that right, Gerhard. So the question was, how do you change the perception of yourself if there has been a sort of almost a history of people saying that this is the way that you behave and that you have a bit of a reputation for behaving this way?
Yes,
Is
I
that
guess
right?
it is.
Yeah. It's difficult. People will change their opinions of other people, but very begrudgingly. We don't like to be proven wrong about others. And we thin slice people, we make a decision about who they are, we take out a little file card from the filing cabinets in our head, a little blank file card, and we write a new name on top. When we've met someone, I've just met Matthew, so I'm going to put Matthew at the top of this card. And based on the information and the behavior I have here, I would define Matthew in these terms. And I write that on the card and put the card back in my head. And then, excuse me, the next time I meet Matthew, I go, oh, Matthew, I've met Matthew before. Where's that card? I've got it here in my little Rolodex in my head somewhere. Here we go. A, B, C, D, E, M. There we go. Matthew. Matthew. And what do we, right. We thought Matthew was this. Right. Therefore, I will behave accordingly. If this is who I think Matthew is, I start to adjust my behavior immediately on hearing that I'm going to work with or meet Matthew. Rightly or wrongly, that's what we do. And even when people change behavior, confirmation bias that we all suffer from, an unconscious bias, means that we tend only to notice the evidence that proves the original view that we had and almost discard evidence that suggests that perhaps this person has changed or what we've heard about this person is not true because we don't like to be proven wrong. If I've heard that Shirley is unprofessional, or I believe Shirley is unprofessional, I'm going to notice the really unprofessional things about Shirley's behavior. I might unconsciously filter out anything that suggests otherwise. So this kind of makes me think that to do that, as per this question, excuse me, to do that, you have to do something really very impactful, what I call a heroic deed. You have to do something that creates real visibility for yourself. So it's performance, it's behavior above and beyond expectation. You need to be responsible for something that no one thought that you were going to do or that you were capable of, that no one saw coming, that no one even asked for. innovation, something amazing that is a huge, big dollop of evidence that says to the world, look, you may have heard otherwise. You may have heard about the me from 3 years ago. This is the me now. Look what I am doing. Look what I am leading right now. Look at what I'm creating. And this, you cannot ignore this. And the bigger and the brighter and the more surprising and the more unexpected and the more valuable that is, the more that people have to take on board the fact that this is the truth of who you are. And the bigger it is, the more that you got to build on the pie model, because really this is about incredible levels of performance that will build a really strong image for you because you are responsible for it, and people will want to know who is the person that did this, who is the person that led this, who is that person over there doing that right now, who is the person getting this feedback, who is the person that the clients are saying these things about. I want to meet that person. I want to meet that grad. I want to meet that analyst. I want to meet that VP. I want to meet that outsourced individual in another country, because no one saw that coming. That really surprised me. And that's been fantastic for this organization. And I want to know who they are. So again, that's how you gain exposure as well. And it's what's known as a heroic deed. It's something that you can do or lead. And it doesn't have to be a massively time-consuming piece of work. It can just be an amazing piece of innovation, an idea. It's a step out your comfort zone, but you create a positive scene. You create a real scene, but a positive scene that says to the world, this is who I am. And that speaks far louder than any gossip, hearsay, or sense of what you've heard about or what you heard someone did in the past. And worst case scenario, it says, well, yeah, maybe that was true, but I've changed, as we all do. And this is the me that's right here, right now, doing this. You can lead that. Something that we can all be responsible for. We can all look out for those heroic deeds.
Oh, thank you very much, Seth. I think we're way over time, but it was a real pleasure. Thank you for this great presentation, and I would like to thank you all for attending. And I hope you have enjoyed this webinar as much as I have, because I certainly look forward to being my own coach. Next week, we have a webinar focusing on alternative data, which is not about alternative facts, but rather an insight on alternative data sources. I welcome all to join Steve Pulick and Ryan Sullivan from Yippee. I wish you all a great afternoon and see you next week.
Thank you very much.